Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's service workshop on mapping your student data landscape. A huge thank you to UCT and the DAS team for hosting this workshop. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Um, who is starting? Rashna, you're up.
Okay, sure. I think Deepti, can you share screen, please? Right.
Can you see it?
I can see it. You just need to switch to presenter mode. Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Deepti. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see everyone's names on the screen. And thank you for being here, taking the time to be here today. So I'm not going to waste too much time with introductory comments because we've got quite a tight schedule to get through today. So just to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about today, to remind colleagues, slide please. Today we're going to be talking about mapping your student data landscape. And we're going to start with a little bit of a framing, which I'm going to do. And then we're going to move into some examples that relate to the framing. So I'm going to give you an overview of what we are referring to as our student data landscape. And then my colleagues will follow on with some detailed descriptions of some of the elements of that landscape. Then we'll have a group activity, which Stephen will take us through, where you are going to engage with potentially thinking about your own landscapes. We'll have a group report back and discussion, and then we will wrap up. Slide. Okay, so just to remind us of what the intended outcomes of today's workshop are. So what we would like the colleagues to do, and the tasks that we have designed will sort of take us through the steps of doing this, is we would like the colleagues to think about their own student data landscapes. So as I'm mentioning these, you'll see on what should be the right-hand side of your screen, there's a little QR code and it says ask your questions at the bottom. So I would suggest use your phone to do this so you're not switching between screens in terms of your computer. And click on that, and what it will do is will take you to a Padlet. And a Padlet is simply a way you'll see a little plus sign when you open that screen, and you should be able to write your questions down. The reason why I'm mentioning this here is because I want you to think about these learning outcomes as we work our way through the workshop, so that if you have questions, either for yourself or for the team, that we can then address those once we get to the end of the information sharing. I think it's a good way to just sort of keep our minds active and keep what's on the tip of your fingertips, so that we don't lose that opportunity to generate discussion at the end. Okay, so what you should have been shared with the invitation to this workshop is what we hope to achieve with today's session. The first being that we would like you, as I said, to think about your institution, your own institution's student data landscape. So as you listen to us, iterate for yourself, what do you have, what do you not have? We'd like you to think a little bit about the maturity, visibility, and how you might be using student data and reports at your institution. We'd like you to think about where there might sit opportunities or gaps to improve the use of student data at your institution, and then to look at where you may have people that could use data more effectively, but that are not served by what is available at your institution. Now, we recognize that not everyone has complete oversight of everything that happens at their institution. So think about it from your perspective, think about it from the place in which you operate, and I still think we can have a very useful discussion. Slide, please. Okay, so as I said, my task for today is to give you a bit of an overview of what we mean when we say student data landscape here at UCT. So, but before I jump into what is essentially a document, so it's a catalog of all of the data, tools, and underlying data sets that sit in our landscape. I want to talk a little bit about why this work exists in the first place, because ultimately it's not about dashboards. And when I say dashboards, I want you to also hear data, because we don't all have dashboards for everything, but we may have data tools or just the data itself. So like I said, ultimately, this isn't about data and dashboards. It's about how we can better understand our students. That's our drive, and how we can use that information to support their success. So slide. Oh, no, sorry, stay. So like most universities, UCT generates a huge amount of data. We know a lot about our students, how they move through the institution, how they perform academically, what are their experiences, and what happens to them after graduation. But for a very long time, much of that information lived in different places. So it sat in institutional reports, faculty projects, surveys, learning management system. And often the people who could benefit from that didn't really know, one, that it existed, or where to find it, or very importantly, how to access it. Access, I want you to keep in your head, is a big key word of what we are attempting to do with generating the student data landscape. So one of the motivations behind this work was very practical. How do we make it easier for people across the university to find and use the information, access the information that can help them make better decisions? And how do we move beyond just collecting data towards actually improving the student experience and student outcomes? So I talked about purpose. I talked about our motivation. So who is this for? So at its core, the work is about empowering the people who influence student success. And that includes lecturers, course conveners, heads of departments, student support practitioners, institutional leaders. And these are the people that are making decisions every day, right, about what happens in the classroom and what happens in the budget, for example. But the idea of this student data landscape is not that everyone needs to become a data analyst. The idea is that everyone should have access to the evidence they need that helps them to do the work that they do more effectively. So you might ask, who is this meant to help? The obvious answer is it helps staff, but staff aren't, while they are the end users, they are not really the stakeholders that we care most about. We really want this work, at least from our point of view, at least from the DAS. You may sit in different spaces in your institution, but for us, it's about students as beneficiaries of this work. So, for example, a lecturer who better understands the profile of their students can adapt their teaching practices. A faculty that understands what courses might be creating bottlenecks in progression can change things to fix that. A support unit that understands what our first-year students are going through can provide more targeted support. So ultimately, we want to be able, these tools must be able to ultimately serve the benefit of our students. So in doing this work, we have come across a number of enablers and a number of constraints. And again, I would like you to really think and reflect on your own spaces and how these things replicate themselves in your environments, or maybe replicate is the wrong word, but are mirrored in your environment and context. So for us as the DAS specifically, so not as necessarily as the entire institution, but the DAS, what really enabled us is some of the things that came together at the right time. Now, that was opportunistic, whereas you may think about ways to engineer this at your own institution. So some of those things involved that institutional data was more available than ever before. As I said, we all generate huge amounts of data, but now we're also quite data conscious and data savvy. So this avails itself to having access to more data. We have better tools for visualization and analysis. Platforms like Power BI have made it possible to move away from like static reports to interactive exploration, and that draws people in. We've also seen growing institutional interest in student success, as I'm sure you all have, but also in improving teaching and learning, using data analytics, this concept of evidence-informed data decision-making. So these are all things that have created an enabling environment for this work to happen. But as the DAS itself, one of the things we've really benefited from is the collaboration from different parts of the university. So it wasn't necessarily just seen as one person's job to do this. And I'm not going to go into detail on this right now, but I would just want to mention that buy-in, particularly from executive, having enabling structures, and then having the right governance structures are key to scaling this work. And this is just a learning that we have had as we've been doing this. So some of the challenges, so of course we've had enablers, but we've also had challenges or constraints, because the work is never as simple as just building a dashboard, right? So the student success is complex. No single data set tells the full story. There are challenges around data quality and integration. We've learned that data has to be interpreted very carefully and responsibly, and there are many questions of privacy and governance and access that have to be asked and answered as you pursue this work. And then there's also the challenge of moving from insight to action, because a dashboard doesn't improve student success, people do. And so having a dashboard, we need to think about it as something that enables better conversations. But I would like to make an important note about some of the challenges, as something that is both a challenge and an opportunity that has emerged in doing this work. So as the scale and the sophistication of data work grows, so too come the responsibilities. So there's more responsibility because we're making student data increasingly available. We are joining different data sets. Lots of people are using lots of different tools. So a lot of the questions that we have asked ourselves is how do we ensure that the sensitive student information is accessed only by those with legitimate need, that data is interpreted appropriately and fairly, and that analytical insights are never used to unintentionally disadvantage our students. It's quite a responsibility that we are grappling with, that I'm sure you are grappling with, that even something like a data governance policy doesn't always account for the everyday situations that you run into where there's something you may not have thought about. So there may be a use case. So it's very important to have protocols in place for dealing with those as well. So with that in mind, I'm just going to take a few minutes to actually introduce the data landscape, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who will lead you through some of the more detail of some of our tools. Slide, please. Okay, slide's not changing. Okay, thank you, DT. All right, so our Dear Data Student Landscape at UCT is very much a work in progress, but essentially it is made of three parts. So we have three categories of tools that are described in the landscape. So when we talk about our landscape, what we're talking about is a document that acts as a map of the work that currently exists. Because what we realized is there's a lot that happens across the institution, even a lot of work that we were doing, and we didn't really have a way to properly catalog and categorize the work. And that's what we did. So it acts as a navigation guide for somebody who wants to see what's happening and where do they go to find that information. If someone wants to understand course performance or insights into the first year experience, then they use this document to figure out where they might be able to find those things. So it's a document fundamentally in 3 parts, where the landscape is organized into 3 categories. So the first is what we would call our standardized reporting. You're going to hear about 2 of them today. The first section, you're going to hear about the Know Your Course and the course pass rate dashboard. But we also have a number of surveys. So this is tools that are regularly updated and routinely used. We then have the exploratory work. This is a little bit different. So these are not necessarily tools that everyone uses every day. Instead, they are examples of deeper analytical work that was started with a specific question in mind. And what we agreed was by cataloging these and putting them in one place, people will be able to see things that may, in fact, be appropriate for some a problem that they are trying to solve, but for which we do not yet have a routine solution. So that sits in the second category. And the third category that we describe in the document are the data platforms. And so this is not really tools, but it allows the UCT community to get a sense of what are the databases and the platforms that underpin the work that can be done and that is being done. So this includes things like the data dictionary, which helps people understand where institutional data comes from, and the Amatuba Analytics Builder, which allows data sets to be combined and customized, etc., as well as our business objects warehouse. Deepti, I'm going to ask you to click on the link for the document, and I'm going to just give you 2 minutes before I finish up. So we're going to go to the menu of this document. So you can see on the table of contents here how the document is organized. We have an overview of each of those 3 areas I just described. So our reports, so consistent reporting, ad hoc and exploratory work, and then an overview of the data platforms. And for each of these, we have, for example, if you look at the Know Your Course or students, you will see that there's a description. We talk about who this audience is for this document, for this tool, who can access it, how do you access it. I can't read the writing on the rest of the screen there, but they've got resources and then use cases. So we also provide examples of how this has been used so that the reader can reflect on that and potentially relate it to what they are doing. One of the things the last thing I'm going to talk about here is the stakeholder tool matrix. Deepti, can you click on that for me, please? And you'll see in our stakeholder tool matrix, what we've done is then looked at, we've given those 3 categories of data, we've identified which tools fall in that category, and we've indicated what profile or role within the institution could find use in this with this tool. So I'm going to leave that there. We maybe, if colleagues have questions about the landscape document, we'll come back to that later. But it is by no means complete or perfect, and very much a living landscape document which requires ongoing work. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to the next. Should I do the next slide quickly? So we're going to do a showcase of the tools. And in each of the tools, my colleagues are also going to talk about the purpose, audience, reach, opportunities, and the constraints of each of these tools. So I believe Jamia is the first up. Go ahead, Jamia. I'm not sure who's sharing, whether you are or DT sharing for you.
No, I'm hoping DT is going to carry on. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Jamia, you're just muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. As Riyashna said in her introduction, the particular report that I'm going to talk about forms part of the standardized reporting. So this is a report that first rolled out in 2021. So it's a report that has been took a few years to develop, and as we've gone, we've improved it, and now it's kind of fully rolled out. So it's part of that suite of the standardized reports. And as Riyashna said, we really going to address the 4 or 5 big questions here for each of these reports that you saw, the way that we've outlined it in the data landscape document. So this particular report, the purpose is to give lecturers and course conveners an overview of the historical performance on the course, as well as provide a profile of current students on the course. And by current students, we mean the students who are registered on the course in that year. And so this report is distributed to course conveners and lecturers at the beginning of each semester. So at the beginning of the semester, it goes to all the conveners of first semester courses, the second semester to conveners of second semester courses. And you can you can see on screen, it's a screenshot not meant for you to engage fully with the contents of it, but to show you that the report constitutes 5 pages, where 1 page is just providing the profile of the current students registered in that year in terms of demographics, as well as NSC and NBT performances. Then we have 2 pages that look at historical performance of students on those courses, so looking at the achievement in the previous 5 years, as well as the achievement gaps in gender, financial aid, and redress. It gives, particularly for incoming lecturers, it gives them some historical view of performance on that course. Then we've also got an additional page that looks at NBT subdomain analysis, and that is also a historical view looking at the students and the NBT performances and comparing that to the performances on the course. And so we get a more granular analysis of that relationship between the subdomains and performance on the course. And then some additional details of what other courses students do. So this is really giving a lecturer or convener this bigger picture. And as I said, it's primarily distributed to course conveners and emailed directly to them, but it can also be accessed by heads of departments or deputy deans, as there are shared folders where all the reports are made available. And in addition, it is embedded in all of the course sites on the learning platform. We don't really have a real mechanism to know exactly who is using the reports beyond knowing how many people have actually opened the report. So this is something that we can improve, particularly in terms of closing our feedback loops with respect to users. So at the moment, our feedback is mostly through interactions with lecturers and conveners. And even though we have an online feedback form that's linked to the report, we've not really received many comments. So mostly people either reach out to us directly, or they're part of other forums where we have had some feedback from the way people have used the report. We do make use of whatever opportunities there are to talk about to engage lecturers with the use of the report, the kind of insights they can draw from it. So, for example, we do a regular presentation and interaction on the new academics program that happens about twice a year. There are also webinars that are offered to all staff. We have presented these things at our data festivals and also at the Teaching and Learning Conference. So we try and use these opportunities to get people to engage with the report and what insights they can derive from the report. Again, here something that we can think about doing more showcases and perhaps targeted campaigns, and perhaps one of the spaces we've not exploited sufficiently is to perhaps do more presentations at departmental meetings. So people all kind of focus on courses within a department. We could look at these Know Your Course reports across a suite of courses within a department. And then finally, what are the barriers and challenges or difficulties? Well, one of the biggest things which I think working in the space that we often take for granted is that not all people are comfortable interpreting graphical and numerical information. So there is an extent to which for some people it actually does require some mediation in interpreting what information is being communicated through these reports. And like I said, the forums in which we engage with lecturers and conveners on this are limited. So we would, I think, benefit from more forums to discuss the usage and insights gained from the reports. And then finally, I think this is a small administrative thing that we could definitely fix, which is that course convener information is not always regularly updated. And so in some cases, we've had these reports going to people who are no longer teaching on these courses, and then the current teachers actually don't even know about the report. So this is something that we're striving towards, is to build that institutional awareness of the existence of the report, so that it almost becomes routine for every lecturer convener before they start teaching, that they actually have a look at what their Know Your Course and student report is saying before they commence and walk into the class. I think that's it for me, and I'm not sure if we're going to take questions on that, if there are any questions of clarification. Thank you, Deepti. And Rashna.
Good. Thank you, Jamia. Rashna, would you like me to continue? Or
yes, please. Sorry, I was finding my mute button. I was checking. There are no questions. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Rashna. Good afternoon, colleagues. I will be doing the course pass rate report now, a standardized report that we've been producing for a couple of years. And following Rashna's introduction and Jamia's descriptions, I'll try and answer those 5 questions around this course pass rate report. To start with the purpose of the report and the history behind it, I can start by saying that this is a long-standing historical report that has been produced by the university for a very long time, although it may have been produced under different names and for different purposes and different audiences. But what we have eventually come up with, as a name at least, is the course pass rate report, which outlines how courses are doing in terms of how many students pass and how many students fail. The history of this is better known as the when it had the name Courses Impeding Graduation, the CIG, the SIG report, where a report is created annually showcasing courses that had high failure rates. So the methodology for this was pretty straightforward. The university is interested and the faculties are concerned about those courses that seem to have high failure rate and consistently so. So it's one high failure rate in a given year is not considered to be a flag. It becomes a flag only when that high failure rate is persistent across many years. And for us, the cutoff has always been 75% pass rate. Any course that dips below the 75% pass rate and persistently so over the course of a few years is flagged for additional conversation and potential intervention. This has been the modus operandi for many years, but by the time we started working on it more actively in DAS, we've changed a few things and added a couple of others. One of the things that we added is at the request of members and over discussions is it's not sometimes enough to know if a course has been failing students in large numbers across 3 years and only then to be flagged. Sometimes we need to be aware of courses that have dipped in their pass rates drastically from year on year. So one of the pages that we added was, okay, let's track those courses that have slid and more than 5 percentage points from a previous iteration. In that sense, in addition to the persistent low pass rate course lists that we are producing, we started producing this over 5% decline since the previous view that we had of the same course. While we are extending the work on the courses impeding graduation, these two new views were made possible and we were able to create this using latest technologies that we have so that we can share it a little bit more easily and widely. So just generally speaking, the purpose was really to identify these courses and to make sure that these courses are known to be high failure rate courses and for some form of intervention, hopefully to take place at the level of the faculties. As far as these particular reports are concerned, the audience is and remains at high level at the dean level. Faculty leadership is who receives these reports, and we hope that this is shared with the appropriate heads of departments, if not course conveners downstream. But the first and foremost conversation that we have is with the faculty leadership. This is sent to faculties as faculty reports, and we hope to get, and sometimes we do get some comments from the faculties. We no longer produce these as static reports, as Riyashna and Jamia mentioned. We are using Power BI to produce and share this report. That means it's only a link that is shared with the course with the faculty leadership. And they are always welcome to share those links downstream to their course conveners as well as heads of department. So it's difficult to gauge how many people do actually receive these and make decisions or interventions based on it. But what we do is that we send it to all the faculties that are available and to which these reports point to. And the report itself makes it easy to filter by faculties as needed. And it allows for granular deep dive into particular courses that are on the screen that you see here. That means the audience, whoever is reading this will have a sense of how a particular course is doing by drilling through and looking at the history of the course that is found as part of this interactive online report that we produce. Because we do send this faculty report to faculties, we do get feedback, and sometimes we try to reintroduce some of that feedback into our in the next iteration of reports. For example, one recent feedback we received was to do with the lack of positive stories that we are telling from these reports that I guess we've always been concerned with courses that were doing poorly, and we focused on the courses that did poorly, and we never gave much attention or draw attention to the courses that are doing that are performing better or have performed better of the course of the years or compared to the previous years. So one of the things that we are planning on doing is actually as part of the course pass rate report, we will include a version or a section where not only those low performing courses are introduced and described, but those who have actually are performing better compared to previous years. And given that some of the constraints that we can think about, thank you, Dipti, for the new screen, is that as an institution, we found that we don't have good definitions of what we mean by, for example, in our case here, pass rate. And this takes two different forms. One, we don't quite know what a pass rate is, and then we realize that pass rates actually mean different things to different people. So one of the things that we needed to do was have a very good definition of what we mean by a pass rate by using this big table that we see here on the screen. There are many different symbols that are associated with passes and with fails, and there are some symbols that change over time. So we needed to come to grips with how to really represent this and to make this screen part of the necessary part of the report itself, so that people have an idea of what is being calculated and if it works for them. For example, at the level of the course convener, what is considered to be a pass rate is that we have found is only those students who've made it to the final examination and did write the final examination, and whether they passed the course based on that or not. This will essentially exclude all those students who started but never finished, or were not allowed to write examinations for not meeting some of the duly performed requirements, as well as those students who just never showed up for exams. So these are not necessarily considered to be students who failed by the course convener who's teaching the course. These are considered to be a very important part of the failure rate or the pass rate conversation when it comes to the head of department or the dean, who is responsible for those students who started but never finished, and how long to report on them. So we needed to have these kinds of conversations clearly and cleanly to produce something like this. What does a fail rate or a pass rate mean to one person or at one level? Might be very different to how, for example, a dean might consider what a pass rate or what a fail rate is. So these were a necessary part of the conversations, and this is something that we expect to see in different areas where we have this kind of conversations. Another problem, another constraint that this is much more structural and much more important, and might not be always around, but we've had an example of it, so it's probably worthy of mention, is that we need to be careful about what we focus on or what we get our audience or our stakeholders to focus on. So when we are focusing too closely on the pass rate and what pass rate means, and if there are things that are associated, either punitive or otherwise, with that particular pass rate, that measure, that pass rate, that 75%, stops becoming a measure and it becomes a target. What that means is that lecturers and the departments will start optimizing for that. They just make sure that they will not be found below or above a certain threshold where they're expected to be. This is the case, long time known, very well known analytics law that we call the Goodhart's law, where when a measure becomes the target, it just stops becoming a good measure. So we have to keep eyes on these kinds of measures that are easy to look at and easy to, as it were, gain if they are followed through by measurable consequences. So these are the kind of things that we need to keep our eyes on when we are building measures, because measures, by their definitions, have a tendency to reduce what we are looking at into something that can be targeted. And the moment they are targeted, then they lose becoming the measure that we are expecting to be. Because what really happened in our case, and without getting into the details, is that the department started changing the denominators from which the calculation is being made, and provided an example or a reason why they would exclude certain class of students from the calculation, so that they can arrive to the pass rate that is acceptable to the institution. So these things need to be taken care of and understood properly for this kind of course pass rate report that is institutional to take place. But on the other hand, there are opportunities and positive things that to come out of it that we've seen, not necessarily without iteration of the last couple of years, but just historically, is that one, we see that there are really dedicated educators who are interested in the well-being of the students and the success of their courses, so that we have an example of a very large, very well-known, quote-unquote, killer course that was really looked at properly. And it was broken into various smaller courses to address the needs of the various students that are enrolled in it. Some of these courses are service courses, and that means they are serving more than just a homogeneous group of students. They may be serving more than a couple of faculties at the same time. And you have a certain class of students who are always performing better than other students. So by breaking it up into smaller pieces, smaller chunks, different chunks, the right kind of students will be assigned to the appropriate level of the course that they are expected to pass. On the other hand, another thing that happened is the availability of technology has made this a quick and easy report to produce. It's very formulaic. It can be produced almost immediately after all exams are submitted. Of course, there will be some courses that will take a little bit longer, and some of them will have outstanding grades, but at least our experience is that up to 95% of the courses will have all the grades ready and for analysis almost as soon as it is made available. I think I can stop there, and I see Riashna. I think it's, yes, I can stop there. Riashna, over to you.
Thank you, Kende. So colleagues, we've heard about a tool that speaks to the individual lecturer. We've had a site of a tool that speaks to more management level decisions, and now I'm going to hand over to Marianne, who's going to talk about a tool that looks at it from a data from the advisor perspective. Go ahead, Marianne.
We're a little bit behind time, so if Marianne and Liza could move through swiftly so we don't lose out on the group time. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you, Stephen and Riashna. I'm very quickly going to talk about the Analytics Builder tool. It's a tool that's available as part of the Brightspace suite of tools, although it's not part of the standard package. It's a tool that's sort of an add-on to the Brightspace tools, which is our learning platform. And the early warning system is an example of a tool that we've built on top of the Analytics Builder, or using the Analytics Builder tool, rather. Are the slides being shared? It doesn't seem so. DP, should I share the slides?
Yes, please. You can go ahead, Marianne.
Okay, sure. Let me just do that quickly. Share. Microsoft PowerPoint doesn't seem to be showing my Teams, just the application window. Okay, let me do this. you should be able to see it now. So as I said, it's built on the Brightspace suite of tools. And what afforded us the ability to build this early warning system that in, I think it was June last year, so about a year ago, we got the ability to bring in other data sets along with the Brightspace data sets to create custom dashboards, reports, and visualizations. And what that allowed us to do was to see the Brightspace data from varying different perspectives. So instead of just looking at a course and comparing two courses to one another, or comparing or looking at the data within a course, we could now look at the data from the perspective of various academic years of study. So we could look at first-year students or various cohorts. We could look at programs, students who are registered for ECPs, students in residences, particular faculties, etc. So that was sort of the opportunity that made this data of interest to different groups within their institution. And so that was the opportunity available to us when the science faculty came to us with this idea to develop an early warning system. But just very quickly, what Analytics Builder enabled us to do before I show you the system or the dashboard is, instead of now asking questions like, how are students engaging in my first year physics course, we could ask questions like, how are physics majors engaging in my course compared to non-physics majors? We could ask questions like, how are students who are repeating this course engaging with the materials compared to students who are doing the course for the first time? Or how do NSC and NPT marks correlate with performance for different programs? So we could ask a lot more nuanced questions. So I want to go into showing you the dashboard, but just very quickly, for context, there was a system in place before we built this version of a 2.0 early warning system. So what the science faculty advisors would do is they would look at midterm grades and see, okay, well, students are some of these students are not performing well in terms of their midterm tests, and so maybe that's an indicator that we need to go and check on those students and see whether they need additional support. But as you can imagine, at the point where students write their midterm tests, that's a little bit too late to be considered an early warning system. So what was required was that they needed data a little bit earlier on. And that was an opportunity to use Analytics Builder to look at the data within the gradebook. So this meant data from things like tutorial submissions, weekly quizzes, etc. So grades data that was available before the point where students wrote their first major assessment. So I'm going to see if I can do this just to demonstrate the early warning dashboard. I hope that you can see that screen. If not, please shout. It looks on my side like you are able to see the early warning dashboard at the moment.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is the early warning dashboard. Firstly, the first screen is to identify students who may need support. So we worked with the science faculty advisors to consider what were the metrics that would alert them that students were requiring support or may require support. So we looked at two rough metrics. The first was non-participation, and they defined non-participation as the student has received a grade of 0 for 3 assessments in a row, and this is across the assessments that they're taking. So this would indicate to advisors that they that students were perhaps falling behind for whatever reason. It may be that they were ill, it may be that they were overwhelmed, but it was an indicator to check in. The other measures were measures of relative performance. So if you see here, what percentage of assessments did students fail, along with the number of assessments that they did to provide context to that percentage? What percentage of assessments did students fall within the bottom quartile of their class? And then for recency also, how many out of the last 10 assessments, how many of those assessments did the students fall within the bottom quartile? So it may be a high percentage in the bottom quartile, but it may be that in the last 10 assessments, students were doing well and advisors wanted to be able to pick up on that. So you could either at this stage look for which students were in need of support. These are real students, by the way, but anonymized for the purposes of demonstration. Or you could look up a student number. You could say, I want to see this particular student. You type in their student number and you'll find more information about them. So I may have neglected to mention, but the update allowed us to bring in other data sources. The update that took place in June 2025, so about a year ago. And so what we did was combine the business objects data from PeopleSoft with the Brightspace data in order to develop this early warning dashboard. So then if we, for example, identified this student, we click on their name, and now we've got more granular information about how they are performing. So I'm going to scroll past this. And here we can see a timeline of the student's performance. You can see that at some point here, they got 0, 0, 0, which would have flagged them for non-participation, and then an advisor would be able to pick that up. But this also tells us when the student was performing in the bottom and for which assessments. These are all the assessments here. For which assessments the student was performing in the bottom quartile, in the middle quartile, in the middle 50% and the upper quartile. We've got the students' access to the platform. So when last they access courses that they are registered for, when last they access the system. We've got their academic record. So this would be a lot of the data that comes from business objects, the academic program that they're registered for, their midterm grades, and then if they were a second-year student, this would show their full academic record. But in the case of this being a first-year student, you might want to reference their NSC results, their NBT results to see, okay, well, this is actually a student who performed well on the NSC and NBT results. What exactly is happening here? And if you wanted to contact the student, then you would be able to see their phone number, their email address. And if you couldn't get hold of them, which res they are in the case that they are res, so that you could contact them via the res wardens. And I shall stop there if there are no questions.
Thank you, Marianne. We're going to leave questions, I think, until the end. I'm going to now hand over to Liza, who's going to talk to us about the sort of other end of the student's journey, which is when they graduate. Go ahead, Marianne.
I think
Liza.
2 slides back, Deepti. That's me. Okay, so I think a lot of universities are familiar with this data. We previously called this the exit survey, so the graduate exit survey. And this is the data that is collected at time of graduation. So about 4 months after they've became a qualifier, so in their program. So we have a lot of this data actually going back to 1993, which was the first time when the graduate exit survey was done, and it's moved a couple of places in UCT since then, and currently run by Career Service, which is part of CHAID, where DAS is also positioned. And then the sort of data in there is the graduate employment outcomes. So questions around their main activity at time of graduation. Are they working? Are they looking for work? Are they studying further? If they're working, where they're working? And we also recently, 2019 expanded this to also include sort of entrepreneurship explicitly, which wasn't before. And then for a long time, I'm almost like we're almost sitting at a sort of a spectrum of what are the good intentions of what we want to do with this data, and almost there. But for a long time, this data was mostly at management level, and what we want actually from this data is to be able to bring some change for future graduates. So are there information in the where they're getting employed, or are there specific information around courses where you can see that the employment rate is quite low, and could there be an intervention? Next slide, Deepti. So this is just a screenshot of the dashboard, and this is with all the data from all the years that's in there. And you can see that it can filter down to faculty, to what sort of program level they are, what year data we're looking for. We've got everything from 2007 in this dashboard, and then also the degree, and then their first major that they chose will also be, and all of this can be filtered. The data is anonymized on the screen, but at the back end there is a student number, and it meets with the data from the student warehouse, where we can get the demographic data that we don't ask in the survey. So this is basically just a summary from the survey. It's probably about 30 questions long, but this is just a summary data that focuses on the employer, the salary, the job title, and everybody knows that the employment rate is always asked in rankings as well. So this was probably the most important point for the data from management, is just that question every year of what is our employment rate, and what is the median salary for our graduates. But obviously there's a lot more that can be done with this. So next slide, Deepti. So just to get to the constraints and enablers, I think one of the biggest constraints is trust, with faculties trusting this data. We had some challenges in the past where even with a pretty good response rate of 60%, 50%, faculties don't feel they agree with what the data is showing. And this is quite divisive data, if I can say that, because it is data that shows how employable are your graduates in your faculty department, and often when it gets sort of presented, it's next to another faculty's employment rate. And so it's something that would take a lot of work, if this is something that you don't have in place yet in your university, to build the trust with academics and working with them to sort of start trusting the data and trusting the process. A second constraint is visibility and reach, where we want everybody, like lecturers, for instance, to be able to use it, but where do we put this dashboard so that it's easy accessible and people just know where to go to get access to it? And then, especially with data that goes along a historic line, a constraint is often the data quality, consistency, and the continuity. Every time there's maybe a new line manager, it's like, let's add a question, and keeping that historic line is always a challenge. And some of the enablers, same with having all this data, enabler as well, because suddenly you have this long line of data that you can use. What happened fairly recently, end of last year, is that the Power BI access, we got access to all staff at UCT, and now suddenly this dashboard is accessible to everyone, which helps a lot with access. And then what we started doing 2 years ago is having annual faculty conversations, so having meetings with faculties, the management team, talking around the data, and that usually spins off more conversations from that. So that's an important piece to sort of plan in. And then in terms of opportunities, really just figuring out, I mean, what this whole session is about, how to link this data to other data in the student success data landscape. It's an important sort of marker if you think about student success, and if you ask students about student success, where they're going to be working, or what meaningful employment they find is very important to them when they sort of if you ask them, how do they understand success? So it should be able to fit in this whole data landscape. But how do you link it to things from admissions or things from like our career services, their sort of interactions with students? And then also one of the other opportunities is how do you turn this into data-informed advising, whether it's academic advising or career advising. So lots of opportunities, but also still lots of work for us to get to that point where it's really maximizing the use of it. That's me.
Thank you so much, Liza. I'm now going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to take us through the group activity.
Okay, thanks everyone. So we've got an hour in this session. We had 40 minutes for the group activity, but let's maybe see if we can do that in 35 minutes, and then we will take 20 minutes for group report backs and discussion and 5 minutes for the evaluation at the end. So this is what we're going to do in the group activity. So we are going to be working in Google Docs, and I've set up 8 Google Docs. So each Google Doc is a template. And when you're placed into a group, you need to find the document for your group and then click on it and work in that group. And so we've asked you to do 3 things. So we'll just run through the template quickly. If I can switch to screen sharing. Right. Okay, so here's our Google Doc template. You should all just be able to click in. It will show you as anonymous. So the first thing you do, hopefully the amazing Sadie team can put you as far as possible into groups which are grouped with other people from your same university. But if we end up with 1 or 2 groups with only a few people, then maybe just pick one university to describe, and you can talk about your experience with people from other universities, and then just list the people who are in your group who are contributing it. So the first part of this is basically just to list what you have. So list the most important, or as many as you would like to, essentially student data assets. So, or artifacts, tools, reports, however you'd like to think of them. So we've presented 4 examples. That's by no means everything in the UCT landscape. So maybe we've got 15 or 20 different types of reports that somehow reflect student data and experience. And we showed you quantitative reports largely, but don't forget about qualitative sources, including student feedback surveys, course evaluations, for example, which work differently, but are also important. So take perhaps 10 minutes to just list everything that you have. So the title, what is it for? What's the purpose, and who acts on it? So you produce it, but for what? Somebody takes some action in response to the information contained in it. Who are those role players? So in the next part, there are different mapping exercises. And so the point of mapping is to kind of look at your environment as a whole, what we call the landscape, to think about who has access to what and what is the completeness of that and what are the gaps. And so what we're asking you to do this is to consider what you described as your data artifacts or assets by these different role players. So these are roughly kind of grouped according to levels. So starting with students, what do they have access to? Student advisors, lecturers, course conveners, program conveners. So we're kind of moving up the institutional ladder here. And you can kind of describe each one of these reports according to kind of a level of access or importance. So in this case, the course pass rate report, well, of course, the BART courses, so the course conveners would have to act on any particular issues. It's the accountability in the universities from a course convener to a head of department. And so that's also the location for responsibility. Faculty leadership would see this, but it's not their job to follow up, but they would want to see that follow-up happened. When you get to the institutional leadership, it's kind of, again, you're getting a higher and higher level view. So you can kind of put this information as to who's important, who is it important to, at what level of significance to them. So that's the stakeholder mapping. the second one is this diagnostic matrix where you think about these reports, and this is a diagram, so you can click on it, edit, it's a drawing, and you can put things on it by just putting a little text box here. So you can say, our course pass rate report, is it standardized or is it exploratory ad hoc? So it's quite standardized, and is it institution focused or is it course focused? Granular, it's kind of somewhere in the middle, and it's quite a regular mature process now, so we'd maybe put it here. Course pass rate report. Okay. And then you can go through and position all your different ones, and it gives you a sense of what the balance is between different types of reports with different concerns. Okay, so this is just my template document. I'm not sure how many people can edit this at the same time in Google Docs, because I haven't tried, but maybe get one person to update the matrix. And then the third one is thinking about particularly the opportunities and constraints. And so here we're suggesting that you choose the three most important ones that you think have the most potential for impact. So it could be something that is a fantastic report but very underused, or it could be that you look at your landscape and you think we really don't have a report that presents XYZ to this audience, and so put that in as a new thing, for example. And then think about purpose, audience reach, and then particularly opportunities and constraints. And so the opportunities are, if we found ways to get a bigger audience for this particular report, it might help support student success in particular ways. So opportunities to improve reach, or there might be an opportunity to improve the report itself, to show more aspects of it. And then constraints and challenges, what's stopping you from making it more broadly available? So it could be kind of political sensitivity around the data and the interpretation of the data. It could be a data governance issue, who can get permission. It could be a technical issue, what format can you share it in? Could be a kind of headspace and attention issue. So this last section is to focus on three of the most important, and then what we'd like you to do when you report back is to say, from looking at the landscape that we mapped for our institution, here are three action items that we could take. And the other thing you can think through as you're doing this is this a process that we could run in our own institution? Because you might not firstly know all of the elements of the data landscape, and so you might want to run this process yourself to get a more comprehensive picture. But also this could be a process of building awareness and buy-in and understanding the different points of accountability and impact that you could get. So that is the brief. Let me just copy the brief into the chat as well. Hoping you retain access to the chat when you placed it into your groups. And now if I can ask the SADI team to do their magic around breakout rooms, and if you could allocate the UCT people into the different groups, perhaps putting us into the smaller groups that have a more diverse mix of institutions. Sound good?
Yes, sorry, just repeat about the UCT. Shouldn't we have a UCT group?
No, so we'll just join and lurk in the other groups or contribute to the conversation. So if there are groups with only one, or if you've got like small groups with, say, only one person from that institution, then you could put one or more UCT people to have a conversation, because we don't want people to end up all alone with no peers to talk to. But I do see quite good representation from across the spread of universities. So I think most people are going to have peers to talk to.
Yeah. How long would you like it to be for?
So we're now at 10 past. If we can come back at, let's call it 3:40 now, that will give half an hour for this exercise.
Okay, 30-minute breakaway. Okay, Elias is going to start them.
Fantastic.
I think, can you move Riashna or Stephen to group 1 or 2? I'm just checking because group 1 or 2 doesn't have a UCT person.
Okay, let me do that. Let me see.
Maybe move Riashna, keep Stephen there.
Riashna is in group Riashna is in group 3. Okay,
Group 3, yeah.
move them to group 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for group 5, the UNISA one, maybe move Lisa
Okay.
to group 2.
2.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me move. Okay. Okay. That's looking okay.
Just pause the record.
My group members were very unhappy that it's come to an end.
Okay, is everyone back? Is the teleporting completed? Okay, I'm going to ask each group to report back quite quickly. We've got 10 to 15 minutes, and you are welcome to share your Google Doc on screen, although, well, let me see if I can do that because I think not everyone's a presenter, or can they share? Or just speak to it. So if we could start with group 1. Do we have a spokesperson or a reporter? Who is in group 1?
Hi, Stephen. It seems I'm gonna have to do it, but I will need support from my colleagues.
You just call on them.
We'll just need some assistance in terms of, we'll just have to collaborate. So yeah, my name is Mkondeleli from UKZN. And wait, am I sharing properly?
I started sharing, but if you can share, that would be better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there we go.
got you. It's starting. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we had to speed through it a bit, some of it anyway. But in the first table, we had identified about 3 tools or dashboards or artifacts. And yeah, a big part of the conversation around the LMS was in terms of the data, we look at the student activity, how they engage with different activities, for how long, how often the login, that kind of thing. And the idea being to keep track of student activity on the LMS, and not only in the present, but also across different cycles, if I can call it that, because for our work, we are UCDB funded, so we work according to UCDB cycles. So across different cycles for reporting and so on. And then the person who said myself there is me. I'm an instructional designer, so the LMS is my primary tool, if I can call it that. But also other teaching and learning stakeholders are also implicated in terms of taking actions. Primarily, I think the executive level would also use this data, but primarily it's the teaching and learning stakeholders. At least that's how we refer to them in our programs. Maybe someone can help me with the student wellness and aiming for success survey.
We're going to kind of run out of time. So could I ask you to kind of jump to the end and what you thought the 3 biggest potential for action?
Okay.
I'm going to post a link just to the whole folder, so everyone is welcome to click through to the documents of the other groups as well to see what was in there.
So what did you say you wanted me to focus on here? This is the last one, right?
So if you reflect on what you described in your mapping process, what did that reveal to you, and what do you think the next steps might be at UK's event?
Yeah, what we had discussed in terms of the gaps, I will focus specifically on the LMS is I think the limitations in terms of the kind of data you can pull in the current state of the LMS. So my thinking would be we need to find a way to use tools maybe like Power BI, better integrate the systems so that also we can have better insights. I don't know if it's possible, but maybe if we found a way to build better or integrate plugins or something that help us get more detailed data and more insights into student activity, and also AI powered systems that can help us compute much faster, I think.
Fantastic. Yes, that's a real area of interest, I think, or that we didn't mention explicitly, but a lot of potential there. Okay, so focusing on data integration and find ways to present integrated data in a way that people find easy to use and digest. Can I move on to group 2? And Elias or Ashton, how many groups did we have?
7 in total.
7. Wow. Okay. Okay, let's make it quite quick and snappy for each group. Group 2, just give us kind of a flavor, and then what were your reflections on what you think the biggest next steps could be for you?
Thank you. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So this is where we started, and we identified 3 tools as well: Power Headers, Autoscholar, and the Illuminate. So what we saw, especially with the Power Header, is that this was especially suited for different types of reports, especially for the high impact module, which are also part of it, and that will be able to identify those high impact modules. Also, when we look at the impact on student progression, is that this can also help in terms of looking at those modules that can impede on graduation, especially impacting on our throughput. So the head of department also can be able, who's responsible for acting in this information. We in this one, most of them are the academics as well as those course conveners. And then Autoscholar, same. this is basically more on a student level, so we can do student tracking on academic performance, and this can also be used for academic advising in terms of its purpose, and then who's basically responsible, also the academic advisors, in terms of that. The Snowflake, which is Illuminate. This is also from our LMS. This is good for the data integration and management. This help us to integrate data with maybe our ITS. So in this case, we can be able to see data broadly. And then also when it comes to its purpose, this is basically used for student activities. On an LMS, you can track the student activities, logins, and whether the student are accessing the materials as well. So this can be also easily be tracked using the Snowflake or the Illuminate system. And then also academic staff here are also the primary ones responsible for being for these activities, as well as the student advising are also use this tool. So when we come to the mapping, we also realize that most of these tools, as you can see, they are on the level 3, they are primarily used whether by student, head of department, especially with HIDA. You can see it's also been used mostly. It's more applicable for students as well as head of department, and it also can also be used for course conveners as well. The Auto Scholar also it's also primarily used when you look at in terms of students, because this is basically for tracking of students, and academic advisors uses this as well as lecturers highly. And now when it comes to Illuminate, also we look at Illuminate as being one of the ad hoc reporting tool, but also lecturers can frequently use this for reporting as well as head of departments. So these tools are mostly used not just only for viewing, but decisions can also be made out of these tools. And we position HIDA on this quadrant because we realize that it's more standardized, more aggregate data on the university, and we also positioned AutoScholar as standardized reporting because it is more on tracking student performance, and it's basically used regularly here. And the Snowflake also, as it can also be used as a standard reporting, but it's also more on ad hoc when you looking at exploring certain information. I think one of my group can just help us finalize the last table. Thank you. Anyone from group 2?
Your group seemed to do really well in filling in a lot of detail there. So colleagues, we are unfortunately running out of time, so we're not going to be able to go through each group, but I would invite you to look at all of the other groups, and you can just click through the link in the chat to the different Google Docs. I'd like to just take a little bit of time if anybody would like to share reflections on if you found this a useful process, and did it help you see things or think about things in the landscape at your institution that might lead you to how to flesh out or fill out the data landscape? And do you think this is the type of process that would be valuable to run in a bigger way in your own context with local stakeholders? So this is the first time we've run an exercise like this, so we're interested in how you found it in your experience. Or just if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and share your perspectives, then please do.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khodu. I'm from the Central University of Technology, Free State, CUT. I found that the exercise was extremely helpful in the sense that it gave us an opportunity to take stock of how we're actually using the data, and also to assess whether the data is actually being internalized, across the university. So I think that following this exercise, we would probably just sit down and discuss this and see how we could sort of maybe take some steps to see what could happen. So thank you. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Gordon. Just looking for universities that we haven't heard from yet.
Yeah,
Somebody, yes, go ahead.
this is Anele from Walter Sisulu. For me, I think on one side it's giving me comfort in knowing that we're not the only ones with problems, especially with the early warning systems. When it comes to the data that's sitting on our ERP systems, that's not talking to what is happening on the ground. It gives us problems when you need to present your things on the dashboards that you create, and it shows wrong things. Yeah, that's one thing. And secondly, I think I realized that when we were doing the mapping, the matrix, yes, that the student view or voice or none of these things seems to come last. We are not thinking about, especially with our early warning systems. Our students don't have access to that in terms of, and also the service that we are running. How to give feedback to the students who have given us feedback? How do we then give back to them to say, this is what we found and this is what we're going to do with it? We still haven't figured that out correctly. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Nella. Yeah, there's some great insights there. And I also we found doing this at UCT a really messy process, and that it shows you the messiness of what you do, in that there's so many overlaps and also under opportunities that aren't yet exploited, or things that you wish worked differently. And so we found it helpful as a way to share with other people the whole landscape, where they might only see part of the landscape, but also to see how different stakeholders could use or have access to data that does exist in the institution that they just don't know about. So I think we all face many of the same problems around data integration and access to different types of data, and then competing for people's headspace and producing data that you're not sure whether people use it or not. So it's definitely not the intention of a mapping process to come up with something that kind of looks neat and beautiful and logical, because we know that's also not real world. But we hope the mapping process might help you spot the gaps, or even just kind of make sense of it for yourselves and see where the points of leverage are that give some potential for improvement, or presenting a more integrated perspective to different stakeholders as they might need to use it. Okay, we're almost out of time. It does always feel like there's so much potential to run longer sessions or more sessions. I do hope that you might pick this up at your own institution, and this also maybe is a good format to run for in-person conferences or workshops where you have the opportunity to do that. Ashton, would you like to remind everybody about the evaluation link?
Yes, everyone, please can you complete the evaluation link? I have pasted it in the chat. We appreciate your feedback, and we do use your feedback. I think at the moment we only have one response, so please take the time before you leave just to complete it. We will also share the feedback, the evaluation link, with everybody who has attended, as well as the recording. So a huge thank you to everyone. Do you have some final last words, Stephen and the UCT team?
Well, thank you for joining us. I guess this was a concept that we wanted to try out, building on our work doing our own data landscape, which itself was a kind of messy emerging concept. And so very much definitely not a solution, but being on a journey together. And feel free to use the document template and adapt it in any way you like. And if you've improved it or you find a great formula for running a workshop with stakeholders, then please do share with us and with Sadie and with the Siyaphumelela community. And if you'd like to get in contact with the DAS team, then our email is there in the chat. So thanks for your time today, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks also very much to UCT for sharing your work and also sharing, well, developing and sharing the templates that can be used by the partner institutions. We really appreciate that. A huge thank you to everybody. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, colleagues. Cheers.